Georgia fans, you know Carson Beck, you know Malachi Starks, you know Michael Williams, you know Smile Munden, you know those names because those players are already established stars within the Georgia program. But as the 2024 season approaches, the question becomes, who's next? Who are those next players that will elevate themselves into star status with breakout seasons in 2024? So with that in mind, I've got 5 players that I think fit the description as breakout stars for the Georgia Bulldogs in 2024.
We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? I'm Tyler, and this is Glory UGA Plus, where I give you a small taste of what we've got going on the Glory UGA podcast. So if you like today's content, if you like this video, make sure to check out the Glory UGA podcast wherever you get your podcast for more great Georgia sports coverage, the type of Georgia sports coverage that you're not going to find anywhere else. Also, make sure, guys, let's not forget, subscribe, like, comment, let me know what you think about today's topic. I'm sure there'll be some strong opinions. Maybe some of you will agree with my list. Maybe some of you will have some issues with my list, and I would love to hear from all of you guys. As always, this video is brought to you by the fine people at Alumni Hall. All right, guys, it is a Top 5 Tuesday, and on today's show, I've got my list of the top 5 breakout player candidates for the Georgia Bulldogs in this 2024 season. Now, off the top here, a couple quick caveats. There are no freshmen on this list. You'll find that out. No freshmen, no incoming freshmen. I will save them for an entirely different list. Another week, we will do the most impactful incoming freshmen. We'll talk about those guys. But if you know me, you guys have been listening to this podcast for a long time, you know that I'm not in the business. I don't think Georgia should be in the business of having to count on true freshmen to make impacts. If we get impacts from true freshmen, which we do from time to time, Brock Bowers, an obvious example there in recent years, that's great. That's gravy, though. That's a luxury. We don't count on that. So these are players that have either been in the Georgia program for a year or two, maybe a couple years, or in some other program in college football. They have been in the college football level, and that's who we are limiting this list today. It is a top 5 list. I say that because it makes it tough. The reality is, guys, there are way more than 5 guys that I think could potentially fit the breakout player profile that would go on this list. So I had to cut off the top 5 list. I have 5 guys. If we went 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 11, 12 guys, I'd have guys for you. So there are certainly going to be some names that you think should probably be on here that I have to leave off. And I hate that because there's a lot of players I want to put on here, I want to give them some love, but it's top 5. So we've got to pick 5 guys. So again, comment, let me know if I left somebody out the list that you think should be on here. If there's a glaring omission, let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys because you know what? I probably agree with you. There are some guys that I feel I'm kind of wrong about leaving them off this list. So let me know who you think I whiffed on, who should be on this list, all that stuff. But all right. Let's go ahead, guys. Without any further ado, let's get to this list. I'm going to start with number 5. We'll work our way to number 1. Coming in number 5, this is a guy that I'll be real with you. When I first put this list together, he was not on my initial list. He was in my honorable mention list. But as I thought more and more about it, he ultimately slid into the back end of this top 5 list. And that is offensive lineman center Jared Wilson, who has the unenviable task of taking over for multi-year starter Cedric Van Pran, who we all know and love. We love Ced. And so Jared Wilson has some big shoes to replace. Now, the reason I hesitate to have Jared Wilson on this list initially is he's an offensive lineman. It's difficult in general for offensive linemen to become stars at the college level because they don't go score touchdowns. And this is a numbers-driven sport. The people who talk about this sport for a living, they don't watch all the games, guys. Newsflash, I don't know if you realize this. All these national talking heads, they watch a game or two a week. They don't know what they're talking about. So they look at numbers, and offensive linemen don't put up numbers. So I didn't have him on there initially, but the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? Who cares about numbers? I think Jared Wilson could be a breakout player for this team. I think Jared Wilson could work himself into NFL draft status this year. In fact, I think he could work himself into potentially top 3 NFL draft round status. So, yeah, tough for offensive linemen to become stars, especially interior guys, especially centers. But I do think that Jared Wilson has the profile of a player that could develop into not just one of the best centers in the SEC, potentially one of the best centers in the country. Now, another part of the reason why I initially left him off my list is that there's just not a lot of a sample size to work with here. He has not really played any meaningful snaps because Cedric Van Pran was such a stalwart for us there at center. I mean, he started multiple years for us and really just didn't miss any time. I mean, he was an Iron Man out there for us. So when we saw Jared Wilson, which we did see him, he played, I think, in every game, like 13 to 14 games last year, I want to say, played a lot of games, but it was always garbage time. So, you take that for what it is, but that's what we have to work off here. So that's part of the reason why I initially had him off the list. But the more I thought about it again, the more I realized, going back and watching the tape again from last year, even though it was garbage time, the small sample size that we have to work off of with Jared Wilson, I think is very strong. What we saw from him last year, he looks the part. In fact, I've talked about this quite a few times on the podcast. So again, make sure you check out the Glory UGA podcast wherever you get your podcast. So our longtime listeners, you know how I feel about Cedric Van Pran. Love the guy. I am not here to rag on Cedric Van Pran. Was an absolute warrior for us. Was, again, like an Iron Man, leader, experience, all that stuff. And we were really fortunate that he came back last year to kind of really consolidate the middle of our offensive line. However, as great as Cedric was from a leadership standpoint and that experiential standpoint, physically, he wasn't a dominant center. And I mean, I've said this a couple of times. I'll say it again for those of you who might be new to the podcast, just finding us for the first time. There's a reason Cedric Van Pran came back for another year, right? He could have gone pro after the 2022 season, but he didn't. He came back. Sure, he loves Georgia. Cool. You want to win another national championship? That'd be cool. Be part of history, win 3 consecutive national titles. You want to make that run. But if the money's right in the NFL, that doesn't matter. Like, we've seen that time and time again. You're going pro. But the money wasn't right because his draft stock wasn't where he thought it would be. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason that, yes, he got drafted this year, but was a 5th-round draft pick. Cedric Van Pran physically is not the most intimidating, dominant force at the center position. Doesn't mean he's not good. Doesn't mean he can't have an NFL career. He's just not quite a physical specimen. Jared Wilson, however, kind of is. So it's an interesting situation where we're losing the experience, we're losing the leadership that made Cedric Van Pran so valuable to this team. Again, I love Ced, not trying to kill the guy, just trying to be real with you guys. We're losing that, and on one hand, that hurts, that sucks. But on the other hand, I truly do believe we're replacing Cedric Van Pran with a far superior physical athlete, a physical specimen, with a far higher physical ceiling than what Cedric Van Pran had. And guys, you don't have to take my word for it. Yeah, I agree. I told you, small sample size. I love what I've seen from him, physically speaking, in that small sample size, but admittedly, it's a small sample size. But you have guys like Tate Ratledge, who plays next to him, who during the spring labeled him as, quote, a freak athlete. You have Kirby Smart, and if you guys have ever watched a Kirby Smart press conference, you know what I'm talking about. I've watched every press conference this man has ever given at the University of Georgia. And I'm just going to tell you, if you don't know this, I'm sure you know it, but he's not one that's apt to just speak glowingly about players, especially players that haven't ever started and that still ostensibly at least are trying to earn a position. He doesn't put that, use an old Nick Sabanism, that rat poison out there, right? I mean, he just generally doesn't do that. Like Brock Bowers, he would rave about him, but like those guys are few and far between, and Brock Bowers was an established star, right? But this is what, and I'm going to read this quote directly so I don't butcher this. This is what Kirby Smart had to say about Jared Wilson heading into G-Day in early April. He said, quote, "I am excited for the rest of the world to get to see Jared Wilson." Kirby Smart said that about this guy who's never started a game for Georgia. Guys, I'm just telling you again, Kirby Smart does not talk like that really about anybody, especially a guy who's never started a game for Georgia and still has to kind of like pay his dues, earn his stripes, for lack of a better term there. So it's not just me. His teammates, his head coach, who doesn't talk like that really about anybody, they are saying those things about him. So what I've seen with my own 2 eyes, it seems to be certainly backed up by what his coaches and his teammates are saying about him. And physically, again, I love the guy. I think his ability to get to the second level with his athleticism. I mean, he's 6'3", 310, guys. He's a little bit stronger than SVP. He's more physical. He's certainly a better athlete in my estimation based on the sample size of what I've seen from him. And that was one of my issues with Cedric Van Pran playing center. is he really struggled to get to the second level, number one. And when he got to the second level, he really struggled to stay on blocks, to actually be effective at the second level. In fact, he would fall on his face and be on all fours far too often for my liking. He was still really good for us, but I think there's room to improve physically there. And I do believe that Jared Wilson can be that guy. I think Jared Wilson could contend potentially for all SEC honors. All SEC first team, I don't know. But I think he could certainly be in the mix. I think that highly of him physically. So do his teammates, and so does his coaching staff. So there he is, Jared Wilson, no offensive lineman. Not typically a position where you classify someone as a breakout candidate. But I think Jared Wilson fits the bill. So I got him at number 5. Got to give the big uglies a little bit of love here, guys. All right, coming in number 4. Now, this is one I think a lot of you would expect to be a little higher, and I'm sure a lot of you leaving comments are going to let me know that, and that's cool, guys. Again, when I came into this, I did expect to have this guy at number 4. I thought he'd be higher on my list, but I've got at number 4, linebacker C.J. Allen. Now, before you rip me apart in the comments, just hear me out here, guys. I love C.J. Allen. I'm very high on C.J. Allen. I think he's going to be a really, really good football player for us. Last year, played well relative to the fact that he was a true freshman. Ended up starting 5 games for us last year. Pop Dumas-Johnson went down late with an injury, and he played well at times, but we also have to recognize while he did do some very good things for us, that Ole Miss game where he was SEC Freshman of the Week, he earned that. He was fantastic in that Ole Miss game, which is where he had to start for the first time for Pop Dumas-Johnson when Pop got hurt in that Mizzou game. He was great in that game. You watched him that game, and I just rewatched the game for like the 4th time a couple of days ago, and you're like, dude, yeah, like this guy could be All-American next year if this is what we're going to get game in and game out. However, while he was great there, and there were other moments where he was really good, he was also a freshman a lot of the time. He had those freshman moments. Auburn, remember they were running the ball all over us, right? Some of that quarterback run stuff, the misdirection stuff they were running. Well, it wasn't just C.J. Allen, but C.J. Allen certainly fell victim to that. And that was, game 5 of his freshman year? You get that, all right? You can forgive that. But right after that Ole Miss game, you go to Knoxville the next week, and man, he was a liability. I'm just going to be with you guys. He was a liability against Tennessee. He wasn't good against Georgia Tech. I don't want to necessarily call him a liability against Tech, but also kinda. They ran the ball far too well against us than they should have, and C.J. Allen missed some run fits, got caught with misdirection at times. His eyes, poor eye discipline. Again, freshmen do these things. Alabama in the SEC championship game. I mean, none of our linebackers were good in that game. I mean, we were without Smile Monday, with no Pop Dumas-Johnson. We were playing. I mean, Xavier Sori came off the bench, and he was MIA for half the year. All of a sudden, now he's starting that game. So it wasn't just CJ, but he had some freshman moments. And I think that sometimes we look back at his freshman year, and people are just like, oh, my God, CJ Allen, man, he was like an All-American player last year. It's like, nah, man. He was good at times, and he flashed. And you could see the potential, but he was also very much a true freshman, and he made those true freshman mistakes pretty commonly throughout the year. However, he's not a freshman this year. He took his bumps, he took his bruises last year, had some growing pains, but he is now an experienced player. And he is a guy that's coming to this year I do expect a lot of. 6'1", 235, was really good, again, relative to the fact that he was a freshman. I don't think he wasn't all SEC freshman last year, guys. In fact, and this is where I really had trouble with this. Again, those of you listening to this podcast going back to last offseason, you know how high I am on Raylan Wilson. I love me some Raylan Wilson. I think Raylan Wilson's physical ceiling's actually maybe a touch higher than C.J. Allen's. However, with Raylan Wilson getting hurt in fall camp last year, missing the first couple of weeks, it set him back and allowed C.J. Allen to take that lead ahead of him. Both guys were early enrollees coming into the 2023 season, but with the injuries, C.J. Allen was able to kind of take that lead there, and Raylan was playing a little bit of catch-up. I do think, though, long-term, I think Raylan's a little bit of a better athlete. Is he as physical as C.J.? I don't know, and he hasn't really shown that. I love both guys. I really do. But I had a hard time keeping Raylan Wilson off this list. But I'm going to go with CJ here because I do think he's the guy that has the best chance to start here. Certainly if you base it off what we saw at G-Day, we know Smile Munden will be back. I think CJ's going to slide in there next to Smile Munden. But look, guys, we're going to have a very liberal rotation inside linebacker. We have a lot of guys that can play and a lot of guys that will play. But I do think CJ's going to start, so I'll give him a slight edge here over Raylan Wilson. But I love me some Raylan Wilson. You guys know that. But here's the thing with CJ. Yes, he did make some mistakes last year. I don't think in totality last year he was as good as Georgia fans want to think he was last year by and large. But Again, he's a sophomore this year. And what I saw at G-Day, I know, guys, G-Day, like, it is what it is. It's a spring scrimmage, but it's all we have to work off of between the bowl game and the start of the 2024 season, right? So what I saw from C.J. Allen in that scrimmage was a player who looked like he'd gotten his body in a little more physical. I mean, he looked like he slimmed down a little bit. Like, maybe it was the fact that he was wearing just number 3, not number 33 this year, but he is switching his number. Maybe that was it. I don't know. He looked like he'd slimmed down some. He looked faster. He also looked more decisive out there. At times, guys, that was one of my issues with CJ. He was reading way too long. He would allow linemen to get to the second level and get their hands on him, and he was just beaten, taken out of the play far too often. Again, that's a freshman. Like, your head's things are going 100,000 miles an hour. Your head's spinning. I don't think that's going to happen for him. He's gone through that. He's gone through the fire. So while I do think he had some issues last year, I do fully recognize the physical potential and how good this guy can be. And I do think that we're going to see a much better version of C.J. Allen, a much more consistent version. I think C.J. Allen could potentially push for all SEC honors. And All-American, I think, is a stretch this year, maybe going to year 3. But certainly All-SEC, I think that's within the realm of possibility here. And I do think, he's a guy coming to year 2, poised to be one of the best inside linebackers in the SEC, even though I know some of you probably would have him like number 1 or 2 on your list. That's cool. I got him at number 4 on my list. Number 3, now this one is where it gets a little controversial. Because you guys, I think most of you would probably not have this guy ahead of C.J. Allen. They play the same position, at least this year they do. But I've got Jalen Walker, inside linebacker Jalen Walker, coming in at number 3. I know. Tyler, what are you talking about? You just said you left Raylan Wilson off your list in favor of C.J. Allen because you think C.J. Allen is going to start alongside Smile Munnon. That'd be my projection right now. So wouldn't I have to apply the same logic to Jalen Walker, who's also now full-time inside linebacker? Wouldn't I have to apply that same logic? Because I don't think he's going to start. So why is he ahead of C.J. Allen? I get that question. It might seem a little contradictory. Fair enough. However, we also have to recognize that, yes, Jalen Walker is moving more so full-time to inside linebacker, but he's still going to maintain his role as a designated pass rusher on third and long situation when we bring our dime package in the field. That is what makes this guy unique. He just has a skill set that I don't think C.J. Allen or even Raylan Wilson, both those guys can blitz. Don't get me wrong, they can, but they do not have the natural pass rush abilities that Jalen Walker has. I truly believe, along with Mykel Williams, I might give Jalen Walker a slight edge here. I believe Jalen Walker is the best pure pass rusher that we have on our team in terms of explosives, ability to bend off the edge, dip, and get low, that flexibility. This guy is dynamic as a pass rusher. He led our team in sacks last year, only 5. But you also remember this guy he played, for example, Alabama. Guy played 12 snaps in that game. He played about 25% of our snaps throughout the totality of the season. Only played 12 snaps in the biggest game of the year, which I thought was just like coaching out of practice. I love our coaches, and I understand we have all these great inside linebackers. You've got to find a way to get your most disruptive player on the field more consistently. He can not only be a third down player. I think that's a big part of why we're making more of a concerted effort to play him at inside linebacker, which is certainly more of a natural fit for his body type. And that's really what he was coming out of high school. He just has that natural pass rush ability. Guys, 21.5% pass rush win rate according to Pro Football Focus, which is the second highest returning this year behind James Pierce Jr. of Tennessee, which I think was 21.8. So it's basically right there with James Pierce Jr., and he's really an inside linebacker. We're going to certainly use him off the edge situationally to rush a passer because you kind of have to with a guy that's that dynamic rushing the passer when you don't have a ton of guys that can really do it that well at all, especially not the level that Jalen Walker can. So that's why I have him ahead of C.J. Allen. He just has this skill set. He has this one thing that he is just elite at. I don't know if there's like one thing that C.J. Allen is just like straight up elite at. He's really, really good at a lot of things. He's more polished right now at inside linebacker than Jalen Walker. I'll give him that. But again, Jalen Walker has a specialized skill set. We can play inside linebacker, but he has this elite skill set, rushing the passer, that allows him to be, in my estimation, the most disruptive player on the Georgia defense. So that's why I've got him at number 3. I'm extraordinarily high on Jalen Walker, maybe a little bit more so than other people. I love the guy. I think he's going to be one of the top 4 inside linebackers. He'll play a lot more on standard downs, but again, will also be that dynamic difference maker, rushing the passer on third downs and other situations as well. So love me Jalen Walker. I think this guy's going to have a breakout year. I think nationally, people will know this guy's name. In fact, I think he might have a kind of season where he can put his name really in position to be a pretty high draft pick in the NFL draft if things go as well as I think they will for Jalen Walker, making that move to like really more of a full-time inside linebacker. All right, moving into the top 2. All right, top 2 guys. Both these are newcomers. These are guys that have not been on the Georgia roster. They're both transfers. So is it cheating? I don't think so. Again, as I said at the outset, not freshmen. These are guys that have played college football, and I just don't know if enough people are talking about them. I think both these guys could have massive breakout years. And I think they could absolutely blow up this year. So coming in number 2, and it's kind of interchangeable here, but at number 2, I had to make a decision. Somebody had to be number 1, somebody had to be number 2. So coming in number 2, I've got Miami receiver transfer, Colby Young. I'm sky high on him, guys. And I've been saying this since the moment we got his commitment. That when that went public, you can go back and check the Glory UJ podcast, where you get your podcast. You can check the tape, guys. Roll it back, and you can hear me waxing poetic about this guy because those of you know me know, yeah, I'm a Georgia guy, and Georgia football is my number 1 passion in life, but I also am just a college football junkie, and I watch a ton of college football. I've watched 10 to 12, probably, maybe sometimes up to 15, depending on the weekend, games a week. And I watch full games, guys. I'm not flipping channels. I have YouTube TV, I DVR everything. I watch it on delay. I know I'm a weird guy like that. I watch 12 to 15, probably, full games a week. And I watched a lot of Miami. That's why I tell you that. And I remember watching Miami last year saying, this dude's very good. So when I heard that Colby Young was coming to Georgia as a transfer, I was like, hell yeah, let's go. This guy can absolutely play. So over the past 2 years at Miami, not numbers that blow you out of the water, but you also have to consider the context of what kind of situation their offense was in. The quarterback situation, Tyler Van Dyke was really good. His first year and last 2 years has not been great. He's not been able to build off that. He's transferred out now. Now he's at Wisconsin. But last 2 years combined, 79 receptions, 939 yards, 10 touchdowns. Good numbers, not elite numbers, and certainly not a guy that's a household name. I think a lot of people in the Georgia fan base who might not watch that much of Miami, I get it if you don't, no worries there. When you heard that Colby Young was coming to Georgia, you're probably like, who's this guy? And you look up his numbers. I get that. You probably haven't watched a lot of Miami. But I think that might change this year. I think this is a guy that could develop. Certainly playing for Georgia helps with the high-profile games that we'll be playing in. I think he could develop into not just a household name within the Georgia fan base. I think he could develop into a household name among the rank-and-file college football fan around the country. And guys, it's a lot Jalen Walker. He has this one thing that he's elite at. It is the contested catch. He is a big physical receiver. Gives us something we don't really have on the roster, at least not that kind of size, at 6'5", 215. Now think about it. Coming from Miami, I'm not telling you he's the same player as Lawrence Cager was back in 2019? But, I mean, think about the parallels, guys. Big-bodied receiver, had been productive but not elite at Miami, transferred over to Georgia, and if you watch him on tape, you're like, man, he seems like he's got more ability on tape than what he was producing at Miami. I think you can say the same thing with Colby Young. I think he actually might be a little bit of a better overall athlete than Lawrence Cager. And I know Cager had some injuries in 2019, but let's not forget, guys, how good Lawrence Cager was for us when he came over from Miami in 2019. I mean, he had some injuries, but when he was playing, that guy was elite, especially as a contested catch guy. And he was another guy coming to that year, back in, this podcast has been around for 10 years. If you guys remember, those who've been around for a while, I was telling you, I think Lawrence Cager can be really, really good for us. And I'm telling you the same thing about Colby Young. He is a contested catch master, which is something that we are really in need of in the absence of Brock Bowers. Brock was kind of that guy for us. Without Brock, who has been the contested catch guy? Ra had a couple of contested catches, one against Kentucky for a touchdown, was a really nice play, but he hasn't done that. He didn't do that consistently for us last year, and he'll certainly factor in this year as well. But Colby Young is just a guy that's more of a proven player doing those kind of things. And again, just has a body type, some size that no one else on the roster at receiver has right now within this Georgia program. And he's also, I mean, yes, huge, 6'5", 215, but a surprisingly good athlete for that size. If you go back and roll some of the tape from Miami from last year, they would use him a lot of different ways. It wasn't just contested catch stuff. They would absolutely use him in that regard because you kind of have to. That's what this guy's great at. But they would even use him in the screen game, trying to get this guy in space. He is a really good athlete for somebody who's 6'5", 215. And I do think, I'm not going to go out on a limb right now and project this as like this is what is going to happen. But at the same time, I'll also say, I do think there's a world where you could see Kobe Young becoming the top target for Carson Beck as this season wears on. It might not be the most likely outcome. I'm still very high on Dominic Love. We're going to have a full film study of him probably coming. I was trying to get that ready later this week, probably early next week for you guys. I want to do some Clemson Scout the Enemy stuff, which, oh yeah, that'll be coming for you guys as well. But I think there's a world where it could happen. There's even a world, and this is going on a big limb. There is a world, like best case scenario, but I think best case scenario is possible here where Kobe Young could potentially be the second receiver in Georgia history over 1,000 yards, the first since Terrence Edwards back in 2002. Now, Brock would have done it without injuries, but I think there's a world where that happens. Again, not telling you it's going to happen. I'm not calling my shot here right now. I'm just saying it wouldn't shock me because I think this guy has the ability within the framework of the Georgia offense with the stability that we have at quarterback, the quarterback who might be the number 1 overall draft pick in next year's draft class, the current betting favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. With that guy at quarterback, all the other weapons you have around the offensive line you have, the running game that you're going to have, I think that Kobe Young could have a massive year for Georgia. Now, he's got to be out some guys to be the number 1 guy at the X receiver. And like right now, probably Ra Thomas to open the year. Kirby kind of defers those guys. But hey, they're both going to play a lot. And again, it wouldn't shock me by the time we get midpoint of the year that Kobe Young might be that guy at the X receiver spot. Wouldn't shock me at all. So he is number 2 on my list. And coming in at number 1 is a player that I did a full film study on probably about a month ago. So if you haven't checked that out, go check it out. It is tight end Benjamin Yurosek, the transfer from Stanford, a player that I still just don't think enough people are talking about right now. And I've said this probably 15 times at this point in the offseason, but just for good measure, in case you're new to the podcast, you haven't heard me say this. Over the last 3 years, now he was hurt for most of last year, about half of last year. But over the last 3 years combined, Benjamin Yurosek has 107 receptions for 1,337 yards. That's 13.1 yards per catch. For instance, Brock Bowers for his career, 14.5 yards per attempt. So not Brock Bowers, but also a guy that can do a lot of things that Brock Bowers did, which is the point of the video that I put out about a month or so ago. But with those numbers, this is the one that I keep saying over and over again because I want to hammer this home because people are not looking at this guy and talking enough about him, not just in the Georgia fan base, I think nationally right now. No one's really talking about him. I get it. He's coming from Stanford. He was hurt for the majority of last year. He's not a household name. He's been playing at Stanford. They've been terrible for a couple years. I get that. But go watch the tape, guys. I just asked you, go watch the tape. If you haven't, go watch my video. And I put the tape on full display for you, showing you how he can do a lot of the same things that Brock Bowers did in our offense. Not the same level that Brock did because Brock is Brock, but all those things we were doing with Brock, we can do them with Benjamin Yurosek. And here's the crazy stat. There are only 3 tight ends over the past 3 seasons that have put up more yards from the tight end position than Benjamin Yurosek. Brock Bowers, obviously, 2-time Mackey Award winner, only 2-time Mackey Award winner in college football history. Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, awesome player, I think early second-round draft pick. And Dalton Kincaid, who's now starting for the Buffalo Bills. That's the list, guys. 3 players at the tight end position over the last 3 years that have put up more yards than Benjamin Yurosek, and he missed most of last year. That is the type of player that we're talking about here. I do not care that he came from Stanford. In fact, the reality that he played for Stanford, I think that tells you how good he is. That he put up those numbers with the quarterback situation they had, especially last year, with the issues they've had offensively. That tells you how good this guy is, okay? So I understand that he is not Brock Bowers. Again, I'm not telling you that he is. He's not. Brock is a freak, man. Brock is one of a kind. But as I put out in that video, Yurosek is the perfect fit for the mover tight end role that Brock Bowers played so well within the Georgia offense. In fact, Stanford featured him and did a lot of similar things that we did with Brock the way that we did with Brock. I mean, that's what he did. So when we brought this guy in, when he committed to Georgia, I was over the freaking moon. I think the general response in the Georgia family was kind of like, okay, I mean, cool, I guess. And I'm sitting here, I'm freaking out, man, because I know how good this guy is, and I want everybody to understand how good he is. Now, I will say I have some level of concern regarding the fact that he was not here this spring. He understandably, wanted to finish up his degree at Stanford. Makes a lot of sense. So he did that. He's on campus now. He'll be here for fall camp. And he's a guy that is really experienced. There's certainly a lot of overlap in what Stanford was doing, some of their pro-style stuff, and what we do with our tight ends and our offensive back. Go back and watch the tape. Go back and watch the video I put together. And you can see they did a lot of the same things with him that we've done with Brock, right? So there's going to be some overlap there, and he's a veteran. But there is some level of concern there. But I think if you consider his track record and his history and his level of production at the tight end position at Stanford over the last 3 years, and you combine that with how we have featured players like him with his skill set at that position, that is what puts him at number 1 on my list of the top 5 breakout player candidates for the Georgia Bulldogs coming into the 2024 season. So that's my list, guys. Number 1, we got Benjamin Urosic. Number 2, we've got Colby Young. Number 3, Jalen Walker. Number 4, C.J. Allen. And number 5, we've got center Jared Wilson. Now, I mentioned at the outset, I wish this was like a top 10, 15 list, because there's a lot of guys I had to leave off that I didn't want to leave off. There were multiple iterations of this list, and some guys were on it, and then they dropped off of it. So I do want to just quickly run through a couple honorable mentions. I know you guys are probably killing me in the comments saying, hey, dude, how'd you possibly forget about this guy? Raylan Wilson at the top. We already talked about him, inside linebacker. I mean, guys, it's almost dead even between him and C.J. Allen. But I think C.J. is going to start, so we're going to give him the edge there. He started more games last year. Give him the edge there. Christian Miller was on my list. I had him at number 5. And I dropped him off and gave some love to the big ugly, so Jared Wilson there. But you guys know I did a video on Christian Miller once he actually decided he was going to come back to Georgia, flirt with the transfer portal, all that kind of thing. I think the world of Christian Miller. I think he's a Tyler Clark clone, maybe even a slightly more explosive version of Tyler Clark. I think he was playing largely out of position last year, playing more at the zero tech nose guard behind Stackhouse, because we didn't really have anybody else that had a true body type to play the zero tech, and he had to kind of fill in there. He's more of a true 3 tech. I think he will play more this year. He played about 25% of our snaps last year. So this is a guy that I think will play closer probably to 40 to 50% of our snaps. And look, I think Jordan Hall is a guy that could also potentially qualify for this at that defensive tackle position. However, I think Christian Miller was ahead of Jordan Hall last year. I think Jordan Hall has a higher long-term ceiling, but he's got to make more of a jump from where he was last year than Christian Miller does. I think Christian Miller's going to be a really, really good defensive lineman for Georgia, and he probably should be on this list. So if you think he should be, I kind of agree with you there. Roderick Robinson, man, thought long and hard here. The reason Roderick Robinson's not on this list, I think he'll be one of our top 2 backs this year. Really kind of has to at this point. But Trevor Etienne coming over from Florida is going to be the number 1 back for us as long as he's not suspended, or when he's not suspended. So that's why Rod is not on this list, but very high on Rod this year. The combo of maybe Julian Humphrey, Daniel Harris at cornerback, whoever probably wins that job, I think could certainly qualify as a breakout candidate. Janelle Aguero at the star position. I was very high on him coming in last year. Tyke Smith made a fool out of me, and he was just better than I thought he would be, to be honest with you. I thought Janelle had a shot maybe by mid-year to maybe overtake that, because he's just physically, I think, a better physical specimen, better overall, higher ceiling than what Tyke Smith had. But Tyke, give him credit, man. The guy was just an absolute baller for us last year. But however, Janelle Aguero this year, I think he's the prototypical fit for us at that star defender, kind of that hybrid. Yes, you can get corner where you can cover guys, but you also can fit against the run in the box there, which is really what we ask our star defenders to do. Like, that's a big part of what they do, and it's a big reason why Tyke Smith was so good for us. I think Janelle is a perfect fit there. Oscar Delp. I know a lot of you probably think like, dude, like the disrespect on Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky, going with the guy that's not even on roster right now. I get that. If you feel that way, I understand that. I love Oscar Delp. However, Oscar Delp, I think, is still slated to play more of that inline tight end role that he played last year. I think he could play the mover tight end role. I think Benjamin Urosic is just a better fit doing that. He's got more experience doing it at the college levels, and I think that's why we brought this guy in. So I'm very high on Oscar Delp. I just don't think he's going to get as many opportunities in the pass game as Benjamin Urosic is going to. I'm high on Lawson Lucky. I think long-term he'll be a good player for us. But again, Urosic, 3 players, just 3 dudes, guys, that have more yards at tight end position than Benjamin Urosic, and they're all in the NFL right now. So I'm going to give the slight edge there to Benjamin Urosic. Actually, maybe a little bit more than a slight edge there. Lucky will play. I just think Urosic's going to be the guy at tight end. I could be wrong there, but that's my projection. So that's just a couple of names that are honorable mentions. Probably a couple other guys I could have thrown in there as well. But there you have it, guys. That's my list. The top 5 breakout player candidates for the Georgia Bulldogs heading into the 2024 season. We'll come back each week. We'll have a top 5 Tuesday. We'll have another top 5 list for you guys each and every week leading up to the 2024 season. So make sure, guys, keep coming back for more. And again, make sure you're checking out the Glory UGA podcast wherever you get your podcast. Again, small taste of what we've got going on the Glory UGA podcast right here in this video. So I appreciate you guys being here. Subscribe, like, comment, let me know what you think. Check out the podcast. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.